ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk. Make sure to hit up that chat section, Super Chat, to make a donation, jump to the front of the line. Check us out on social media and on podcasting, but make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest videos. And, of course, we have Anthony from the Jets Life podcast joining us here tonight. All of his information and links to his great show are below. And Anthony, it is a big day in Jets land because we are now getting into the second round of interviews for the defensive coordinator. Great, right? The first second round interview was old friend Chris Harris. He has been brought in for another interview. A lot of moving parts in the AFC East, of course. Miami now has their coach. The Bills are looking for their head coach. And meanwhile, the Jets are looking for a DC. How are you doing? And what was your first reaction to hear that Chris Harris was the first round of the second interviews?
Well, I mean, obviously, internal candidate, easiest guy to interview for the job. So I kind of expected he'd be one of the earlier ones in this process. But again, I think they're just doing due diligence. He had the job at the end of the year. Give him a shot at the title, but I do think he has the hardest of it's the hardest sell to say he would be the defense coordinator after what we saw in 2026 or 2025. It would just be very difficult for him to be the primary candidate going into 2026 with this team. So again, you have to interview him almost just to make him feel better about himself. But I'm more interested in other candidates that we'll talk about here a little bit. But get his interview out of the way and see what you got going across.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about the 8 candidates they interviewed. Again, I wish they would have cast maybe a wider net, but we don't know who said no on the phone, basically. And I'll stick with Harris a little bit. And look, I don't want to completely kill Chris Harris. He was put into a horrendous situation.
Right.
Basically, hey, half our defense is hurt. We're playing a lot of undrafted players. Can you somehow – we've already hit the iceberg and the ship's half underwater, but can you try to steer it to port, basically? And look, the one thing with Chris Harris where I can maybe get a little on board is if they announce it, but Aaron Glenn says, look, he's got a lot of talent. I want to ease him into this role, so I'm going to be the one calling the plays. It's going to be on me. If that happens, again, I think Jet fans are not going to like it, but at least I can kind of see it a little bit. The bigger thing to me, though, is there's other staff members that got to get moved off. I mean, Charles London still being in the building still perplexes me. But could you see that scenario potentially where, like, again, if Harris is hired, again, it will not be popular with this fan base. But if Aaron Glenn comes out and says, look, I believe in this kid, but I'm going to take over the defensive play calling, would that, you think, help a little bit, or it doesn't matter?
I don't think that necessarily matters. I think Glenn made it pretty clear what he wants in this whole thing. I mean, there's no reason if he felt comfortable, not that he doesn't feel comfortable calling the plays, but if he felt like that was what his prerogative was, what he wanted to do, he had every reason to take over the play calling duties in, last season when Wilkes was basically running a terrible, terrible week-to-week scheme. So I don't think that's necessarily what Glenn wants to do. I think he would like for his defense coordinator to be the primary play caller. Regardless of the matter, I think whoever the defense coordinator ends up being, there's going to be a shakeup on the entire defensive staff, or most of it at least. A lot of these coaches underperformed. A lot of these position groups underperformed. The defense was terrible all season long. So there is going to be some changes. If he does want to say, hey, let's keep with Chris Harris, I have faith in him. And there's some faith around the league. He's, been labeled as a rising star in the coaching ranks. So there is something there potentially. But the issue of the matter is that Glenn already went through a cycle of hiring, the entire coaching staff and bringing in his own guys. And in more cases than not, you look at position group by position group, he kind of failed with his position coaches. Right. He got to redo the whole thing again in the second season, which is a bad look.
Yeah, and the thing I worry about with Glenn is, and I've laid this out, they have to hit so many steps for this team to get it right this offseason. And the first step of this process is going to be recruiting the defensive coordinator. Because, again, this is not a desirable job. There is the optics that Aaron Glenn could be done after next season if it goes poorly again. And I think it goes to who I think many of us want to be the number one option, which is Jim Leonhard. And, if they could somehow pull it off, that's great. The only issues I have is, yes, Leonhard has interviewed for this position, but almost felt like out of obligation because he was a former Jet, because he was a player for Aaron Glenn. Because Jim Leonhard, like, let's face it, he's one game away from a Super Bowl. He's been named the assistant head coach in Denver, and he's already gotten interviewed by the Cowboys. I mean, Leonhard might not feel the pressure to even come out this offseason. Maybe he just stays in Denver because Vance Joseph gets one of these jobs, and by proxy, he becomes the DC. So I just don't see enough incentive. If they could pull off getting Jim Leonhard, I think it would be a huge win for this fan base and for Aaron Glenn's recruiting. But I just don't see a scenario where Jim Leonhard either leaves Denver or picks a different defensive coordinating job over this one.
I agree with you 100% on that. I think when you look at this coaching staff, I mean, the fire's on, like the seat's hot. And if you're a rising star in the coaching ranks like Jim Leonhard is, and you have options out there, like you mentioned with Dallas, potentially Denver, if Joseph moves on to another head coaching opportunity, there's obviously better options. I think maybe the reason why he's being linked to the Jets, obviously, Sean Payton is a Aaron Glenn guy. Having had him as a defense coordinator when he was a head coach with the Saints. Banjo came from Denver, so there's definitely like that, who type of thing going on there. But Leonhard wants to be a head coach in this league one day, and stapling yourself to a head coach that's likely on his way out is probably not the best for his long-term career. It won't derail him, obviously, but it might give him a few steps back. But if he goes to a team like Dallas or sticks in Denver, your path to being a head coach is a lot shorter because you're probably going to deal with some faster success than having to revamp a defense that was one of the worst in the league last year. Well, the worst in the league last year.
Yeah, and I think that's what's frustrating is because, again, this environment is so toxic, and it brings up should they have one and done Glenn again. I've said there wasn't a great option. I still think this is probably the best option because if they give him 2 years, it's like, okay, they gave him the full 2 years, reset for 2027. But you're right. Jim Leonhard, and I look at the Cowboys job, they have the number one offense. And if Jim Leonhard comes in there, builds up that defense, you're going to be in prime time all the time. That's going to help your job status. And like I said, Vance Joseph might get a head coaching job. There's 10 openings this offseason. He might get another shot. And part of this, too, is now looking at the moving pieces around the league. Jeff Hafley is the new coach for the Miami Dolphins. That was announced earlier today. And how that impacts the Jets potentially is Hafley was the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And one of the interesting pieces now was DeMarcus Covington, who was the Packers defensive line coach and run game coordinator. And now all of a sudden he was one of the 8 the Jets interviewed. There's a good shot he becomes the DC now in Miami. And plus, with all these moving pieces, you never know. Like, one of these other coaches might go to these candidates and say, look, I want you to be my DC. And it's just a more attractive job because you're starting over and you have a clean slate.
And he might even have the inside track to the Green Bay defense coordinator job too. We don't know that either.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too, is like it's moving pieces constantly. Like, one defense coordinator leaves, a lot of times they're just, pulling people up, especially if it's someone that is being interviewed. He's in-house. And if they're willing to let him go, that maybe speaks a little bit to how they feel about him internally in the building, which might come with a little bit of a red flag. Not that it's dire, but if they're looking to go externally when they have a guy in the building, maybe that's a little concerning. But if he goes to Miami, he might just be looking to follow the guy who's been kind of mentored under for quite some time too. That one would make sense. But for him to leave now Green Bay and come here, that might be a little bit of
you bring up a great point. He has potentially 2 options to be a DC at either spot. And look, like, we don't know who's going to Buffalo. Again, that was a bit of a shot with Sean McDermott. And again, guys, comments, super chat to the front of the line. Tony Alexio, and again, I think this is a good transition, it looks like Wink might be the number 1 left if the Jets don't pick fast. And going back to a point you said earlier, And again, I think Glenn has proven that he wants his coordinators to basically run the show. If you look at the 8 candidates, and yes, there have been some that have done play calling in college or as an interim, but Wink is obviously the most experienced defensive coordinator.
Right.
And on paper, it sounds great. He's a hyper aggressive, blitz happy defense. He brings the rah energy, like a kind of a Rex Ryan back there. The problem I look with Wink is he couldn't get along with Brian Daboll. You have issues where I've looked at his defenses, and it felt like his fastball was still back in Baltimore. And I just wonder if this is a coach kind of like Steve Wilks, where and again, I think Martindale's had a better track record than Wilks.
Right.
But you wonder, do they still have their fastball at this point of the game?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're hitting it kind of more or less like kind of where I land. Wink is, he doesn't overly excite me. But again, this list doesn't have much pop to it to begin with. But from an experience standpoint, he's called plays for a number of years with Baltimore, with the Giants. The Daboll and him feud. I mean, obviously Wink has a personality, as you mentioned, similar to Rex. But Daboll hasn't always played nice with friends either. He also had a little bit of an issue with McDermott up in Buffalo. But maybe that was a McDermott thing because apparently him and offensive coordinator Joe Brady also had some clashing going on too. So it could just be a McDermott situation. But the thing I like about Wink, and again, he doesn't excite, but this defense needs a complete shape shifting. It needs the players are doing dumb things. It just they just need intelligence and someone there that can maybe just kind of just teach them along the way and how to do things the right way with the experience and the know-how of how to maybe put these guys in better situations. And really, who of this list has a proven track record of being able to do that than Wink Martindale? I think he comes off as that, being one of the primary ones, and that might attract Glenn out of all these candidates the most, because he hired Wilks because he wanted someone there who can control the defense and have that be his baby. Wink Martindale comes off as in this list as maybe the candidate that can potentially be his version of what he wanted Steve Wilks to be in his past season.
Right. And the bigger issue I kind of have with Wink, and again, I like that he has the experience. The thing that also concerns me is when I look at the candidates, Wink Martindale's had a ton of experience in the National Football League. And the fact that it doesn't seem like any of these prospective head coaches want him as their DC, or anyone with a DC opening is looking at him, does concern me. And it's well, if everyone is kind of avoiding him, it's, kind of the situation. Is it a little bit too much? And again, 62 years old, I still think that doesn't really matter for the age, but I do think, and again, this is what kind of worries me. Wink to me would be a great back page hire. I do think that would create buzz, especially in New York with the track record he had with the Giants. But at this point, I don't want a guy just because he's going to generate some buzz for a couple days in the back pages. I want someone that's going to be the guy to develop, because the other thing too with Wink is, can he develop young players? And whoever's coming in, you want someone that's going to develop players. And you can say what you want about Saleh and Ulbrich, but they develop defensive players, and the Jets are going to have 4 picks, top 44. 2 are probably going to be defense. 1's probably going to be a pass rusher. And can you develop them? Can you get these guys to take a step forward? And that I also think is going to have to play into the equation as well, as do you see any of these guys being good teachers? Because last year, the defense, every level regressed, which is the really alarming part.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where, again, go back to Wink on that one. I think that's where he provides some attractiveness. Listen, from a schematic standpoint, he may be coaching, a few years too late based on his scheme at this point in time, but he's been one to develop players. So players have developed pretty well under his tutelage, and even coaches for that matter. Let's look in the playoffs right now. McDonald at Seattle was under him for a number of years with Baltimore. So that's also a plus on his little track record, is that he's been able to develop even coaches under him. Which, let's be real, tell me the last coach the Jets have had that you said, oh wow, that guy's really climbed the ranks and is turning into something special. They've not had that in a very, very, very long time. Even Schottenheimer now finally getting his coaching opportunity was one that was being considered way back when as someone who could be a future head coach one day, and it took him many stops to finally reach that point. But that's where I would go with Wink. I think that at the end of this all is that he might just be the best candidate because
he wants the job.
Experience.
He wants the job.
Well, because of his experience, my biggest thing. Like the Jets can really, with a lot of these other candidates, you just don't know what to expect. Not many of these guys have called plays at the NFL level. Wink has that track record. It just goes back to what the Jets' problems have been for such a long time. It's been inexperienced coaches at multiple important positions, and they come here to fail. It is almost like the recipe of how things have worked out. At least with Wink, you know what you're getting. And they're going to have a young team, like you had mentioned. And hopefully his staff that he would bring along with him, is similar to what he has had in the past to some degree, and he can use those coaches to develop what will be a very young defense next year. But again, there's no slam dunk pick here from a track record standpoint, but he just might end up being the guy because he doesn't have many other options, and the Jets really don't have many options either.
You're right, and the thing that worries me is, again, like I really wanted them to interview Al Harris from Chicago, and that didn't happen. Again, we don't know.
That would have been a nice one for sure.
Yeah, at least I think that would have been a good one, but we don't know if Al Harrison said, "Yeah, I'm not interested." We don't know at this point. And I agree. Like Wink Martindale, I think has an inside track. The hard part is, do they want to go to a 3-4 scheme for Wink? Because then you have to ask the question, well, can Will McDonald make the transition to an outside linebacker? Jermaine probably a little bit undersized to be a 3-4 end, but it will be interesting to see. I get the feeling, just looking at this list, like Durante Jones from Minnesota, I don't think he's probably going to go anywhere. And I hate to say this, but if I had to guess right now out of the list who the top three are probably going to be, it's probably going to be Harris, Wink, and I think Jim O'Neill. And I think that Jim, just because he's had such a track record with Glenn, he's called plays in the NFL. And again, the defenses he ran weren't great, but he's been a defensive coordinator for the Niners in 2016. He was at Northwestern 21-22, and he was a defensive backs coach for Rex Ryan. The thing with and again, he's a line staffer as well, so that connection might also play. I just look at the other candidates, and either it's going to be the lack of calling plays or the fact that they probably don't want to leave their situations right now. If Jim Schwartz stays in Cleveland, I don't think Bonda's leaving. Covington could be, like we discussed earlier, he could be the Packers or Dolphins DC. And for Durante Jones, he might not have the incentive, and he's also getting an interview for the Cowboys job. I'm kind of curious to see if the Jets wait to see who the Cowboys hire and then wait, or they're just trying to get someone in-house quickly. Because, let's say Jim Leonard goes to the Cowboys, all of a sudden Covington and Banda, who've also interviewed for that job, maybe look at the Jets as the only DC opening.
Yeah, and the Durante Jones thing too. Let's keep in mind Flores having some head coaching interviews going on as well, and he likely follows. If Flores gets a job, he likely follows to be Flores DC. It's a game of musical chairs, is kind of the thing, and it's almost like you're trying to pick where everyone's going to land, and whoever's left over, hey, you're stuck. You're stuck with the Jets. But I think we mentioned it a little bit before. This is the thing about the Jets staff right now, and this whole picture from the external view of what the Jets are. I think this defense coordinator cycle might tell you how externally, throughout the league, teams really do feel about the Jets.
Right.
If there's any belief, which there's not much reason to believe it, but if there's any belief that the Jets can figure this out and that Aaron Glenn could, turn this thing around, you would like to think that one of these defensive coordinators would be able to come here and, see that same vision, and that Aaron Glenn would be able to sell that vision. For him, if he's struggling to sell that vision to coaches, that, hey, you can come here with all this draft capital we have and all this money we're expecting to spend on free agents over the next couple of years and be able to reshape this entire team. If it's hard to sell coaches on that belief, it's going to be hard to sell free agents, trust me, on that same vision when the coaching staff isn't in place or doesn't have the top tier candidates out there. That's obviously to be seen, but it's definitely going to be a crazy couple of months for this team as we head towards free agency and the draft and get into this coaching cycle.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, is we've seen like Drake London keep his job, which is a bit surprising. But I really believe this, Anthony. The defensive coordinator hiring is going to set the tone for this offseason. Because if they get like a Jim Leonard or a really good candidate, maybe even Wink, I think this fan base could be like, okay, there's something. But if they bring back Harris or they bring in someone that has no play calling experience, it's just going to set this nasty taste in our mouths. And again, I think a lot of Jet fans are prepared for it because this free agency is going to be a crazy period. You have 10 new coaches with 10 new opportunities around the NFL. And the hard part too is you look at the guys that are the quote CEO type. A lot of them have lost their jobs, even long tender ones like Mike Tomlin, McDermott, like all these great coaches are getting released, and you're looking for guys that are incredibly innovative. And right now with Aaron Glenn, it just doesn't feel like he's an innovative coach. And what was his calling card to gain this job? Oh, I took all these non-name players from the Lions when our team was decimated and we competed. Well, here at the Jets, you had 5 of your 11 opening day starters, and this team had one of the worst months of a season in NFL history. Actually, the worst statistical month in NFL history.
Yeah, it's scary times for sure. And I think you hit it too. Like this whole perception can change for this fan base. Like right now, there's just no belief. There's no belief in this, just anything. Like the Jets don't have the first pick. They're not getting a quarterback. Dante Moore went back to school. He's avoiding the Jets is what everyone likes to say.
Not the fact that he's only had 18 starts and was embarrassed on national TV. People forget that part. But
and I think that's the right move for him personally. The money's going to be out there, and it probably will be out there next year, assuming he stays healthy and assuming he's has a good season coming up. The money will be there for him. But again, the defensive coordinator can't, like, if you can get one of these top-notch guys, then maybe you can attract some free agents here, and maybe things can start moving in the right direction. But it's going to be really tough to sell his fan base on the signing of a guy like Chris Harris, Jim O'Neill, like that list of finalists that you had mentioned. Like I can't sit here and say many of those guys would just like get us all pumped up and ready to roll into 2026. We could all be wrong, and it could be splash higher that we just didn't know of. But this fan base just needs some juice with all the bad news that's surrounding them right now.
Yeah, we need some hope, and we just need something to break. And look, like that finals list was just who I'm speculating. Harris has been the only second interview as of this point, as of this recording. Again, a lot can change.
Right.
We've seen a lot of different moving parts. And in a weird way, I know this offseason almost feels even more depressing because of all these big coaching moves. But next year, you might look at it being like, well, since so many coaches are moving around this year, maybe there's a chance that one of these there's not going to be as much coaching turnover next year. But I mean, it is a tough place to be right now with this fan base. And again, like I said, this offseason has to go right. I have faith that they can do a good, decent enough job drafting, but do I trust they're going to recruit in free agency? Not really. Do I trust that Aaron Glenn is going to be able to bring big staff? And one of the big things, like we brought up earlier, Drake London's still on the staff. It's maybe they'll move on and get some more offensive pieces, or maybe they'll adjust the offensive staff once they get the defense settled. But I mean, if London is back next year, that to me is just a head scratcher. And it's just basically Aaron Glenn being defiant, saying, I'm going to go down with my guys. And again, that might be admirable, but probably isn't the smart decision.
So my comment on Charles London, the quarterback coach, I think the Jets are just taking it one step at a time. I think it has more to do with the fact that, hey, let's figure out the defense and then we'll figure out the offense. And it's hard to reshape an entire coaching staff. When coaches come in and they reshape the whole coaching staff, it's because they have they come with basically knowing what's going on. Like when they go through that hiring cycle, they have conversations with other coaches like, hey, if I get a job, will you come with me and who will you bring in? Like that's all predetermined more or less to some degree as they're being interviewed. That's all kind of planned out for the most part. When you're going through like you went through year one and now you're going to year two and you're doing the same thing, it's hard to just reshape your entire coach staff, like especially again if it's not something you anticipated having to do. London, I believe, will be one that they likely move from just because it's hard. Again, another one that's hard to sell his fan base on. Justin Fields came here, and we all understand Justin Fields had his issues, but did he have to have his worst statistical season in his entire NFL career with the Jets under Charles London? That's a bad look. Every quarterback that suited up after him, did not look good to some degree. Even Tyrod Taylor, to some extent, was just holding to the football for way too long, which has never been an issue for him. He's been usually one that's known for getting the ball out of his hands and being able to throw the ball downfield. I think if you told me right now, this defense staff has a lot of changes. The offensive staff probably has some changes to the wide receiver coach and quarterback coach, but I think the rest of it, for the most part, stays intact. I think the offensive line coach did a good job. The running game was pretty solid. And tight ends had good seasons. It probably just comes down to the quarterback coach and the wide receiver coach, and you could probably roll with that on offense.
Right, and the Jets also, like, the big thing for Aaron Glenn and the staff is they have to have a plan for quarterback. And right now, you look in Atlanta, like, there's a chance Kirk Cousins stays there. Like, again, is Mac Jones even available for a trade? Like, the Jets got their creative. And also, you look at Malik Willis. I mean, Green Bay defensive coordinator, Green Bay general manager. Like, I will not be shocked if Malik Willis is in Miami next year. So I think the big thing is we need to see a plan. And again, I think we'll see a lot from this front office, but this coaching staff too, they really have to kind of come out and tell the fan base like what the plan is. And when they hire the DC, what is the vision for this defense? Like, what is the scheme? How do they view them? How they're going to develop players? Like, the problem is Aaron Glenn just saying, trust us. It's like, okay, like you need to give us a little bit more. And look, I get Glenn wants to be defiant with the media. He has to learn. The media is your connection to the fan base. And if you are being arrogant to them and telling them that they have no idea what they're talking about, maybe you should also realize you're kind of also saying that to the Jet fan base as well. So I think that Glenn needs to learn in that regard, well, in terms of communicating with us as a fan base.
Mm-hmm. And I think he got better towards the end of the season. I think he understood, like that whole, I don't want to call it shtick, but, the whole thing he was pulling with the media at the beginning of the whole thing, that's probably more him of what he is on a day-to-day basis. And he was rolling with that. And had they got off to a hot start, winning games, nobody would care. But when the season progresses and you're presenting that to the media, that you are, you know it all, you got it figured out, we're going to figure it out, just trust us. The whole mentality of like, we'll figure it out. The coaching is going to turn this thing around, and things just don't turn around. You look silly, and the media will tell you make you look silly. With that being said, like I think some of the media actually have like kind of been more nicer to him than I would have expected. They're gonna make their hit pieces. That's what they're about. But for the most part, I feel like they've actually been kind of nice considering the way he started the season off as far as in the press conferences have been.
Yeah, and look, the best thing for the Jets, again, some people won't agree, but if Aaron Glenn can somehow be the right head coach and prove that he's the right head coach, because then you don't want to go through the cycle again and take another shot again. So you want to see improvement. The big thing, too, is I think with this defensive hiring, like the biggest thing is they need an identity. And last year, the Jets defense didn't have an identity. They didn't stop the run. They didn't blitz. They didn't rush the passer. Heck, they didn't have an interception last year. I mean, that was their identity, was, historically bad. And again, like, I was kind of the mindset that this was going to be a ground and pound football team, run the ball down your throat and play great defense. And they got away from the running, and the defense was just horrendous all season. I mean, yeah, they had that 5-game stretch where they bunted up for a little bit, but in the most part, they just looked horrendous. And once again, I'm more concerned where I understand Jermaine's coming off the Achilles, but even by the end of the season, you're like, he doesn't look like the same player. You look at Will McDonald, you're like, he doesn't look like the same player. And like, outside of Ja'Juan Briggs, you look at this defense, you're like, what piece is an ascending piece right now? And you can't really put your finger on anything.
Yeah. I mean, like, you can point the finger to Malachi Moore and say he had a solid season. Sorry. You can point the finger at Azarius Thomas, say the same thing, but they were rookies that you didn't really know what to expect and played pretty decent is basically how I would say it. They were okay. They didn't look like a fish out of water. So, and to say that that's like what you're tip the cap to, it just looks really bad, especially when you're a head coach that came with being a defensive-minded guy. It's just very concerning overall.
Yeah, and especially when you like trade up for a Tyler Barron and you take Kiko, and they both look completely lost out there. And again, like, the evaluation of this team, we all were screaming, like, we can't go into a season with Michael Clemens being our third defensive end. It's going to bite us in the you-know-what. And guess what? It bit us in the you-know-what for 17 weeks. Although I will not be shocked if he is on a Ulbrich or Salah line roster next year. Like, please take Michael Clemens from us, please.
Yeah, he just might. It's so funny. There's like every couple of years, there's like a player that like you look at and it's like, this guy, how is he sticking around? How is he sticking around? Like, it was Xavier Gibson for like years, like, with us, just sticking around, even though we knew the guy needed to be out of a Jets uniform. And finally, his coaching staff, after that first few games, like, all right, we need to move on. Michael Clemens just is that guy, and it's like, I could totally see like just like a 1-year contract, just because, like, all right, let's just keep you around. You know what's going on here. You can be our third or fourth defensive end, and that is not the recipe for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the next couple months, the next couple months are going to be a lot of speculation too about who this staff's going to take in the draft. We'll talk about the mock drafts, the potential trade outs of number 2 and 16, but I'm very curious to see how they address free agency. And I kind of get the feeling, because they can't improve in free agency, I think they're going to make a lot of trades. I think Darren Muji is going to use a lot of that day 3 capital to kind of get like a Ja'Juan Briggs or a Brownlee type of player, a younger player who's got a year or two in the league, but someone that can come in and make a bigger impact than just taking a risk on a 5th-round rookie and hoping they can make a big impact. Like, that's one avenue I think the Jets are going to look to address this team.
They might have to. Like, right. When we talk about like the fact that they're really not going to be an attractive landing spot for free agents, like, they might have to get creative with draft capital. With the way Muji got Briggs in here, like you mentioned, Brownlee in here, throw some of that 6th, 7th round draft capital and just move some stuff around and get fringe roster guys. That might be the only thing they can do. I mean, obviously money talks, but you can't be spending crazy on overpaying for guys just to get players in the building, because we've been killed by that in the past so many times. When Cagnon was here, his last year here, he felt the desperation, felt he had to do stuff to get players in here, and the CJ Mosley contract ended up working out. Mosley was a good leader, but Le'Veon Bell, Giacomini, he gave another extension to. There was a few contracts that he gave towards the end of his tenure that just stuck with us for a while, and it hampered his ability to build around Sam Darnold as things move forward.
I mean, the one thing is, this is a very good free agent market for safety. I think that's a position you can address in this free agency market. Right. And also, that's a position where you can probably invest a little bit more. Again, my dream is they go out and give Tyler Linderbaum a blank check and say, come, what do you want to play center for us? But we'll see. And again, like with this offseason too, the big question is going to be the quarterback, because I think they're going to draft the kid at some point. I don't know if it's with 16. I don't know if it's with 33, 44 or later. But they also have to have a legitimate veteran plan. And with the likelihood Malik Willis is going to Miami. That's another piece off the board. Maybe they trade for like a Tanner McGee from the Eagles. Like that could be something. And again, like I think a lot of us, we're trying to play checkers right now in chess. Like right now, as Joffrey Ali asks, like, should they move AZ Thomas to safety? No, they're not going to move AZ to safety. If they move anyone to safety, it would have been Brandon Stevens. But I think the big thing is let AZ continue to play on the outside. You have Brownlee on the inside. Draft a safety and sign a safety. Like have Malachi Moore be your rotational third. Like don't have him play every snap, but he can have a role on this defense. And I mean, also don't be surprised if they move on from a player we really like. There is a reason Jermaine and Will McDonald were available at the trade deadline. So will I be shocked if one of them are dealt this offseason? Absolutely not.
I think it's likely one of them does get actually traded at the deadline. Let's be real. I mean, that they both are due for contracts in the next couple of years. And you got to kind of make that decision now. Honestly, hindsight's, you look back and it's like, okay, you had a second round pick on the table potentially for Jermaine Johnson. Maybe you should have taken it. There's supposedly a trade on the table for McDonald's as well. Maybe you should have taken it because now their value is lower than it was back then because they both had, not the greatest finishes to the season. But again, you still need players to play football on any given Sunday, and you have to keep somebody around, and they end up keeping those two guys around, and wasn't really the best showing for them. But I do believe this offseason that they're going to reshape that entire defense to a point that we may not even recognize what it looks like anymore. And one of those two guys will likely be gone.
So
if I had to put money on, I'd probably say it's Jermaine Johnson being traded.
Yeah, I think they have to make a choice because you're going to pay one of them. So I think that's going to be a massive thing. And again, you're paying 75 cents for the dollar right now. But Green Chili D, I guess, dump Glenn and get McDermott. I think there's no chance they're dumping Glenn at this point. No. But I am curious, do you think McDermott gets a job in this cycle, or do you think he kind of takes a year off? Because again, like I don't think he's done obviously he's not done a bad job in Buffalo. They've been great for 8 years, but it kind of feels like if the ref call goes another way, or, Josh Allen doesn't have a crazy fumble, like would McDermott have gotten fired next week if they lost in the AFC Championship game? I'll say I was very surprised. Like if they lost to Jacksonville, I could have seen it, but what are your thoughts on McDermott, and where do you think he could potentially be this season if he gets a job?
I think he takes the year off. I think long run of success with Buffalo, a lot of long seasons that has something to do with it too. In the playoffs every year, at least the divisional round every year. It takes a little bit of a toll on you. That pressure does take a lot. And he's also hitting the cycle a little late. A lot of teams are in the final stages of interviews in that second round already. Not to say he can't obviously still get one of the bajillion jobs that are out there. But he likely takes a year off, allow himself to kind of regroup, kind of go over his mistakes, figure out who he wants to bring in as a future coordinator with him, and start off fresh in 2027 with a whole brand new staff. The whole McDermott for Glenn, obviously the Jets aren't moving on from Glenn. My thing with McDermott is he's a good coach. He set the Bills up for success, got them to the point they are today. And I think the issue that I have with McDermott is, you want a head coach to be able to eventually lead you to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why the Bills moved on from him. I think they found their cap with him. I'm not sure if you watch basketball or follow the Knicks, but the Knicks did something similar with their head coach. They felt like they were capped. They felt like they needed somebody that would, bring in a championship mentality, not just a perennial playoff team mentality. And that's where the Bills are trying to get to. They're trying to find that guy. Mike Tomlin, like when McDermott got fired, the first thing I said, oh shit, was Tomlin. Like, is Tomlin going to be that guy?
And that's shared in the chat too. And it could be. A part of me feels like Tomlin, again, he's coached for 19 years. I think he might just say, look, I'm just being an NFL head coach is an absolute grind. He might just say, look, I need some time just to recover. And he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's now, like, his legacy is cement. Like we thought Cowher was going to come back. Cowher was 49 when he left. Tomlin's 53. I mean, I'm very curious though who does take the Buffalo job. Like, because again, that's the other reason I was kind of surprised since it's so late in the cycle. But I also would say this: like, if you were to come around next season and say McDermott was interested in the Jets job, I wouldn't mind McDermott being the head coach. Again, is he an offensive guy? No, but I think he's shown the ability he can pick good offensive coordinators. And if the Jets have a guy in the draft they can identify and he feels like the OC can work with him, I wouldn't hate it. It's, again, someone that's proven track record. And to be fair, you can make the case that he's done more for the Bills than Beane did. And Beane got a promotion even though he's drafted 2 Pro Bowlers in 8 years. It's like failing upward, the Beane story.
Yeah. Obviously, this isn't a head coaching conversation. It's more on defense coordinators, but the next coach the Jets hire, especially if it's with a rookie quarterback, get the best offensive coordinator out there and make him be your head coach and just run with that. Just let that be your thing because, so many times.
Tomlin's not an offensive guy, though. That's one of the counters I always have. It's like, he's not an offensive guy. But
and Tomlin's actually struggled to find good offensive coordinator help as well. So like that's also been a little bit of a concern. Tomlin, I think, is the one like kind of caveat there because he is just such a strong head coach. Not a single losing season his entire career. That'll obviously change if he becomes the Jets head coach. But that would just be outstanding if he came here and led to a winning season. That would be like, completely different to any head coach we've ever had.
They build the statue after that, just getting to the playoffs at this point.
I know. Even 9-8, man. I love the playoffs, but even 9-8 would just make us feel so much better about who we are as a team. But the next head coach, I would really just like it to be an offensive-minded guy. And let's just run with a rookie quarterback, offensive-minded coach, and let's go.
And I agree with you. And that's also been part of the problem I've had with Glenn is it's great to be the CEO coach and hire the coordinators. But here's the thing. If you hire good coordinators, they're going to become head coaches. Can you replace them?
You got to keep cycling through.
Yeah, and that's what's happening with Dan Campbell. I mean, Dan Campbell, like if you were to ask people in Detroit, would you have fired him to keep Ben Johnson? They probably would be like, yes. Like, and that's the reason, like, you look at the names that have been here, like Shanahan, McVay. Again, they can move coordinators in and out because it's their scheme, it's their system, and they're still calling the plays or at least having major influence in the offense. So that's why, I would love an offensive head coach for the next hire, and why I've been screaming to even if it's a first-time OC, I'd rather go down that rabbit hole. Again, I'd rather prefer a guy with head coaching experience, but give me someone on offense because you need to make the quarterback work to win.
That's number one, man. I look back at I have my Tuesday show with my brother, and I feel like a common conversation we have over and over and over again is how badly the Jets screwed up with Sam Darnold. That offseason after his rookie year, they had Mike McCarthy was, basically like wanted the job. He was adamant that he wanted the job. Yeah. I don't know what fell through, why it didn't work out, but eventually he kind of backed off. The Jets
because Peyton Manning called Woody Johnson and said, you got to hire this guy.
Oh,
I gave you the middle.
Yeah,
Chris Johnson. I'm sorry. Woody was in England. Yeah. Well, again, it's like, wow, we're going to listen to Peyton Manning, who purposely avoided the Jets in the draft. Yeah, we're going to listen to him. But, yeah, that's always the greatest what if to me was McCarthy. And I'm shocked he's not getting more pub. Again, I know he's an older coach. I know he doesn't win in the playoffs, but I'm like, his floor is so good. Like, I don't get why no. And again, here's the other reason I want him even more for the Jets. Where did he work last? Under Jerry. If you can work under Jerry, I feel you can work at least under Woody. Because at least Woody will get dysfunctional at the end. Jerry will be dysfunctional before the first play of the season and trade your star defensive player.
Woody Meadows, but
he's
not the GM. Yeah, Jerry is the GM over there. So
and the fact that he was able to deal with that, like that's why I like McCarthy even more. I'm like, okay, he can deal with dysfunction. So, but I mean, it is amazing. The hard part with Sam, though, and I always come back to this. McCarthy would have held that roster that was so thin and so bad. I just feel like it's time. And we also have to remember with Sam, he failed in Carolina as well. He had to go to San Francisco. And again, people are like, oh, this is my favorite this time with this whole playoff. It's, oh, he sucked with the Jets. Then he went to the Seahawks and now he's great. It's like, you're forgetting a lot of steps. Yeah, you're forgetting the couple of years in San Fran under one of the top 3 offensive coaches in football, then to one of the best play callers in Minnesota, and now to another bright offensive coach in Seattle with an absolutely loaded roster. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm rooting for Sam. Again, people are like, oh, again, he was a great kid. He cared about the organization. You can tell he's a hard worker. I would be thrilled, especially just seeing him in the Super Bowl. I know who we can't stand being in the Super Bowl, but unfortunately, the New England witchcraft. Yes. I don't know what Indian burial ground they built that stadium on, but somehow it's like, you know, the Pet Cemetery, but for good luck, because apparently, you know, the Chargers will show up without their offensive line. CJ Stroud will look like he's never played quarterback and looks like Zach Wilson. And now Bo Nix. Bo Nix also has one of the best playoff games you've ever has a great playoff game. And then an hour after the game, oh, by the way, his ankle's shattered and he's done. You're like, when did that happen?
That was insane because like they even showed him like after the game, like after the field goal was hit, like they showed him on the field, like jumping up and down, celebrating. Like, when did he break his ankle? Like, did he break it celebrating? Like, when did it happen? Like, because I haven't seen it. Usually they'll show you like this is the play it happened on Twitter or whatever. You'll see something out there like this is when the injury. I didn't see anything. I don't know if you have.
I have, unfortunately. It was called Edwin Diaz in the World Baseball Classic.
Oh my God. That was insane.
Yeah. Or Yoenis Cespedes on his farm. You know, like I as a Mets and Jets fan, at least the Mets this week, the smoke took a while to get Bo Bichette.
Oh my God!
But I mean, right now the problem is the smoke around the Jets isn't white; it's just constantly black, unfortunately, because it's just burning out of Florham Park. But I mean, Green Chili D thinks it was the scramble to the left in that play. Again, they haven't really said, and I'm surprised. We'll find out eventually. But one scenario that I think could help the Jets, and I'm hoping this is Jacksonville kind of offer for number 2, because again, it only takes one player to fall in love. Like, I could see the Giants falling in love with the player trying to come up to 2, although that would not be a great PR trade. But I'm fascinated. I'm kind of hoping like a Reuben Bain has a great combine or tonight. Reeves has a great pre-draft. You just want to get as many picks because, you know, right now with 16, you can get a damn good player. The problem is I feel this regime is going to feel like they have to take a quarterback with one of these first premium picks, one of the top 4. And I think their plan is to try to trade back in from 33, but I was looking at the 20s today, and I was looking at the order, and I'm like, that team could draft a quarterback. That team could draft a quarterback and sit. So do you think that the Jets will be patient enough not to draft a quarterback, or do you think they're going to overdraft someone at 16? Like, that's what I'm terrified of.
Yeah, and that's kind of my fear too. I don't think this regime has much patience. They don't have patience working in their favor, is my thing.
No.
Is, you know, as we've mentioned multiple times, you know, in this conversation is, you know, this coaching staff is on a hot seat, and very hot seat to begin the season. They know they need a quarterback in this building. They know they don't have one at all on this roster. Tyrod is a free agent. Justin Fields under contract, but you can't run him back out there after the season he had. They have got to go shopping for a quarterback to some degree and someone that they trust.
Oh, he's cut. I agree. He's likely cut. But you got to have someone in the building first. So that's theirs. He's likely post June 1 where they get to some cap relief out of him. I think it saves something like $20 million or so, or $17 million in savings by doing that. But yeah, right.
It reaches a point where I think that 16 will probably be a quarterback pick. I don't necessarily want it to be because I mean, Arizona did it, so I'm not saying anything is impossible, but you pick quarterback first round in this draft, you're probably not going to draft a quarterback next year, which I think is a silly mistake for Ty Simpson. I think Ty Simpson needs a year to sit and doesn't really fit the mold of what the Jets are operating with. To comment on this Jacksonville trade. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
I was a comment on this Jacksonville trade offer. I messed around a little bit and I was looking at top 5 pick trades over the last 10 years or so. And more case than not, it's always for a quarterback. The one caveat was this trade.
Yeah.
And the Jaguars trade up for Travis Hunter. And in their opinion, they were getting a potential starter at wide receiver and a starter at corner. They felt like they were getting 2 players for the price of 1, and it made a little more sense. This draft, you mentioned the names, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, if you want to throw David Bailey in that conversation, there's a handful of defensive guys that are there that I don't know that, maybe someone, thinks this guy's up here and the rest of these guys are kind of a little bit lower. It would almost require for the Jets to be interested in trading back, for them to trade back to a team like somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. I know it's a hard fall, but for someone to say, hey, we're in that next phase of our rebuild where we need someone elite on defense, let's make this trade move up. They'd have to be willing to obviously sacrifice future draft capital, future first-round picks. And that's always the hard part with any of these trade conversations is, our team's willing to mortgage a future to get one player. It's a tough one. If you're going to tell me Jets trading back, I think the most likely is number 16. Because if there is a team in the 20s that feels like they can get Ty Simpson, that makes a lot of sense. Similar what the Chiefs did with Mahomes. They were picking 24, 25, somewhere in that range. They jumped all the way up to number 10 or 11 whenever they got Mahomes.
And they did. I think they were 15. They jumped up to they were. And again, you need someone to fall in love. A hypothetical would be this: Cleveland at 6. They love Carnell Tate. They think he's going to be great for whoever their young quarterback is. So and again, from Ohio State, great for publicity and tickets. That could be one. But the thing I worry about with 16 especially, and Anthony, I think you froze a little bit, just hopefully come back a little bit. So hopefully we get Anthony back in a sec. Looks like Anthony froze up a little bit. So hopefully he can get a reset. But so Anthony, I'm just taking off your screen real quick. Once you come back, there we go. Technology. I love it. So I think 16, the reason I think the Jets might feel pressure is I'm looking at the draft order. And I can see scenarios where you're like, okay, I could see a team being interested. Minnesota at 18, again, I know they have JJ, but with how it's gone, maybe they like Simpson more. Teams I think that could be really fascinating. Cowboys have 2 picks. They have 20. Do they look at Simpson to be long-term? Look, we're going to put him behind Dak for 2 or 3 seasons. That is a little stretch, but I could see being a possibility. The Steelers, we talked about 21. I think they look at last year and say, we regret passing on the quarterbacks. We need a quarterback. I mean, I look in the later rounds too, does Houston sit there after the debacle with CJ Stroud and now he's been playing, and do they try to reevaluate that position? Because again, they don't have a lot of needs in Houston. They might just say, you know what, we'll draft Simpson in the 20s. If Stroud improves, then we're fine. But again, the problem is this process. We see it all the time. I have a late second-round grade on Ty Simpson. I don't think he's a first-round quarterback. But since there's no quarterbacks, and we know the hype around these quarterbacks and how it gets elevated, I would not be shocked if he's a first-round pick just because of how this process always plays out.
Yeah, and I'm there with you on that. I think Simpson is a kind of quarterback who needs the right system around him and an established offense around him to roll with. It just screams, disaster if you were to come to the Jets at this point in time. Now the Jets can make other moves, obviously make this offense a little bit better. Obviously, bringing in a quarterback coach, as we were mentioning earlier, would be a huge, thing that would have to work in that direction. But listen, the Jets are in a weird situation. I hope and pray that they do the right thing, and with those 4 first picks, build around this team. And then if someone slips to the 4th round, wherever they have that next pick, if like Drew Aller's there or Garrett Nussmeier is still available, or you want to take a flyer on Carson Beck, or any other guys that like later in the draft you want to say, hey, can we throw a dart at a dartboard and hit? Fine, go for it.
Right.
But these first 4 premium picks, I want starters, day one starters, at positions of not high stress, and just build this team. And the next year, we got 3 first-round picks. One of them is a quarterback. The other 2 probably other offensive position players, and you have your offensive coach and staff in place, and that's when you can really kind of turn this rebuild into that next gear and hopefully kind of get things moving in the right direction. But as of right now, I just want no part of picking a quarterback. Even at 2, like it was starting to get a little frustrating with the Dante Moore situation.
Yeah.
It was going to happen if he came out, but he's not there. So, yep, you save yourself.
I feel like with Moore, they dodged a bullet because, again, I love Moore as a prospect, but I don't think the staff would have been patient. They would have rushed him out there, and it would have been a disaster. So, all right, let's wrap it up with this. We started with the DCs. We'll finish with the DCs. Who do you want to be the Jets DC, and who do you think they end up with ultimately at the end of this process?
So who do I want?
Jim Leonard.
I mean, Jim Leonard is the one I want.
Yeah.
Someone that has, that accelerated track right now going his way. He was a Wisconsin defense coordinator. I think did he go to Ohio State or Michigan, I think, for a couple of years?
For Leonard, yeah, he
had stopovers.
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, he was. I think he was with Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin. Yeah.
I think he stopped. Well, whatever. Now he's with Denver, and he's climbing up the ranks quickly there. It would make sense as him being the top of the line guy that you would want around here. I again don't think it's going to be the case. I think he probably sticks with Denver or goes to the Giants as the hot names right now for him to be the defense coordinator at. I'll give honorable mention to the Vikings defensive back coach, Durante Jones. I'll give him some accolades there too. I think that would be an interesting one. Working under Flores for as many years as he has, that pass defense was pretty solid in Minnesota. Forced some turnovers, something that Jets desperately need on defense. But again, another guy to see having alternative options, and probably will take one of those as a choice. I don't know. I keep finding myself back at Wink Martindale being the guy, guy with limited options for a team that doesn't have many options themselves. Kind of almost a NFL arranged marriage happening there. I think he's the guy that ends up coming here.
And I think Wink would be at least a change. I just get this sinking suspicion that it's going to end up being Chris Harris, and that the defense will be, we didn't have the guys. He was thrown into a tough situation, but we evaluated and we feel of all the candidates, he's got the most upside. And look, I think it would be a mistake. I think it would be bad optically, but I just get the sense that Aaron Glenn's going to come down to this and be like, I like Wink, but I just don't know if the personalities are going to clash. And Wink's also the type of guy too, if this defense does turn around and this offense isn't getting it done, or Aaron Glenn's making dumb coaching decisions like not throwing Hail Marys at the end of the first half, you also know Wink is not afraid to speak his mind in the New York market. So I think it's going to come down to those two, which is, again, if I had to choose, I'd rather have Wink just because it's change for change's sake. But, it's going to be fascinating. I think, like I said, it's going to set the tone for this offseason, whoever they hire, because it'll set the tone. Like, oh, do we have some hope? Or is it like, oh, God, here we go again?
And that's what this fan base needs desperately at this point. Just a little bit of hope, something.
Hope, maybe a sedative, a couple different things to help. But, but it's been a rough go. But, He's Anthony from the Jets Life podcast. Go check out his work. His descriptions and links are below. Again, make sure to like and subscribe as we head through this crazy Jets off season, which will have a lot more turbulence as we go through it. But I'm Nolan Rich, and this has been Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time.